And today, as you can see, I will be talking about the cowrie shells in the Buddhist relic caskets, exploring their context and purport. So, let me just... Okay, just a second. This is better, fine. So, when we're talking about the Buddhist context, we have a lot of Buddhist relic caskets which have been unearthed from the stupas from the Indian subcontinent. And even outside, we have different objects inside these relic caskets. So whenever we get such relic caskets, you have coins inside, you have gold leaf foils inside, or ashes also inside, and these are the ashes of Buddha or the monks who have died. We know that very well. And the objects found inside the relic caskets have been a matter of concern for scholars of Buddhist studies, archaeologists, and historians. But often we find that these tiny cowrie shells which are found inside the relic caskets are ignored, and their context has not been actually analyzed till now. And this is a kind of a ritual which is a part of the death ritual, but it has not been analyzed in detail till now. So today we shall attempt a micro-study of the objects that have been found and are very common inside the caskets. So what are actually the cowrie shells? Let me talk about them. This is what we call a cowrie shell. And cowrie shell is a small gastropoda, and when it's a living object, and there are 200 varieties of cowrie shells. Out of these 200 varieties, only 2 varieties are used as money. So there are 200, only 2 used as money. These are called Cipra moneta or moneta moneta, and the other is called Cipra annulus. So the one which you see over here with the golden ring, it's the Cipra annulus, and the ones you see here are Cipra moneta. So these are the 2 types of cowrie shells which were considered as money. So as we proceed, I will explain very quickly, but let us look at the Buddhist context. When we look at the Buddhist stupas, one of the first stupa which comes to our mind is the Vaishali relic casket inside the stupa at Vaishali, because this has Buddha's ashes. And the relic casket which was found inside the Vaishali stupa, which is a mud stupa, is preserved in the Patna Museum at present. I will show you that. This is the mud stupa at Vaishali. And here when they were excavating, Altekar and Mishra excavated, and from this portion came out the relic casket. You can see now, this is the relic casket which was published by A.S. Altekar. And inside the relic caskets, there were ashes of Buddha. There was a Panchma coin, a very early coin, and we also have a cowrie shell inside, as all of you can see. This is the cowrie shell inside Buddha's relic casket. So nobody ever thought what was the cowrie shell doing inside the relic casket. We will try to contextualize this. But before we contextualize, let me talk about the words which we use for cowrie shells. So the Sanskrit term for cowrie shell is kapardaka. So we have to remember, in Sanskrit we call it kapardaka. In Prakrit, we have Pali and Prakrit, 2 more languages. So in Prakrit, kapardaka is called kapadda or kavadda. But these cowrie shells are procured from an island, that is the island of Maldives, which is now a country. So in Maldives, they are not called kapardaka or kapadda or cowrie, but they are called kaptaj or boli, which is a local term. But if they are produced there and they are procured from that area, the word should be Maldivian. But we do not find a Maldivian word. We have to remember these. These cowries were also used by Chinese, and very early. The Chinese called the cowries as bei or hei bei. So money was called bei or hei bei because these were cowrie shells in China. Now when you come to the Malay Peninsula, you find that in Malay Peninsula it's called bia. Now bia comes from bei. So, the Malay Peninsula people learned the cowrie shell from the Chinese, its usage, as well as they got involved in the whole cowrie network. That I'll come to that little later. But now, something very, very interesting is that in the 3rd century BCE, the Chinese changed the terminology and they started using the term Cowrie, which definitely comes from Cowrie. So what happened in 3rd century BCE, that the Chinese had to change the terminology from Bei or Hei Bei to this terminology. We will come to that a little later. In the Cyprus island also you have a lot of them. They are called Sipi, which comes from Cyprus. Now, let me tell you one more thing. The Chinese never came to Maldives to get the cowrie shells. They got it from the South China Sea. So their area of procurement was South China Sea, whereas the Indians, they got it from, of course, Maldives. I'll come to that again a little later. So where is Maldives? We all know this is Maldives, and it is a conglomeration of more than 1,200 islands. And these are all small, small islands in the Indian Ocean. And here is Maldives, and this is the Indian Peninsula South. And you see, it's very close to Sri Lanka, basically. So was there any connection with Sri Lanka? We'll also question that a little later. As I told that there are many kinds of cowries. These are the Cypra moneta, these are the Cypra annulus. Now let us come to the Chinese cowries. It is very interesting that in China, all the cowries were cut. Their backs were cut to turn them into money, because they wanted to string them in a peng. So they used to take a thread, put them inside and string them in a peng to use them as money. Now these are the Chinese backcut cowries from an excavated context from 900 BCE. But when you come to India, the Indus Valley civilization, some of the sites which are very, very early, dating to 3rd millennium BCE, like Lothal, also have yielded some cowrie shells, but we had never taken them into context. Now very quickly I'll show you. Lothal has a very rare cowrie which is called Cypria onyx. You can see it here, and this is the original Cypria onyx, and it has got all the other cowrie shells as well. Now there is another site called Surkodata that also has a cowrie shell, but quickly I'll show you just to tell you that the cowrie shells were known to India but were not found in that context, because they are only found in this area. Just look at the map. So Cypra annulus and Cypra moneta are found here only. So it's not found in this area of India. So they had to procure it from the Indian Ocean, which is again very, very interesting. Now, this is the red line is the Cypra moneta and the blue line is the Cypra annulus. So India only had little bit of Cypria moneta in the down south, and Cypria annulus was not found at all. But now let us come to Maldives. Why do we have it from Maldives? Because in Maldives, if you want to get cowrie shells, the women have to dip their body in the water up to their waist, and they can just pick it up. So you don't have to do much. You can just fish cowrie shells. Now, going back to the Chinese context, the earliest shell currency from China, this is the first currency in China, which are the cowrie shells. And in the tribute to you section, that is 14th century BCE, cowrie shells have been found even in the Neolithic sites and in the prehistoric context. So this in China is a part of their burial rituals. So when a king dies, they will put 9 cowrie shells inside his mouth. When a prince dies, they will put 7 cowrie shells. When a merchant dies, they'll put 5. So there is a hierarchy, you know. When a commoner dies, they'll only put 1 cowrie shell inside their mouth. So from here begins the first ever use of cowrie shells in the death ritual. Now, in the same death ritual also, we are finding them in the relic caskets. So this practice, does it come from China? We'll question that. But here we got also some reference to the use of black cowrie shells and purple cowrie shells from China in the 1st century BCE. So in 1st century BCE in China, they were using black and purple cowrie shells as well. Now in Bihar, in a site called Phra, recently excavated in this decade, we have found the same black cowrie shell which is used by the Chinese. And not only that, all the seals and the ceilings which they have from this excavated context have a cowrie shell shaped in cues, and on that is written the inscription in Brahmi character. So somehow or the other, the cowrie shells were very, very important to the people of this particular site. And as I have told, that in India, if the cowrie shell has got a hole in it, it will not be considered as money. But in China, if the cowrie shell doesn't have a hole, then it will not be considered as a money. So these are the two polar concepts. In China, it has to have a hole. In India, it cannot have a hole. So these are the Chinese contexts. So now what I am trying to talk about is that these cowrie shells have a particular route. So it was shipped from Maldives by watercrafts. It came to the Bay of Bengal, that is the Bengal network, especially Tomluk area, Tamralipti and other contexts. And from here, it actually went to China, either through the land route or through the Isthmus of Khra. But now, here, when you look at the Chinese traveler, Fashian and Xuanzang, both talk about the use of cowrie shells by the people in India, that is, the people of Madhya Desha. So you can see that they were aware that India was using cowrie shells in those areas. So we have done a field work in Maldives, and we have seen most of the islands, especially the islands which have that is the island of Thodo, which yields a lot of cowrie shells. And you see, we were trying to fish cowrie shells. You can just pick it up very easily. It's not very difficult. But then, when you look at the reports like François Paré of Level, a French sailor who was captured by the Maldivians in the 17th century, early 17th century, he had to stay there for 5 years. He states that a Portuguese ship of 400 tons was a tanker having crossed Cochin with a full cargo of rice to take bolis, that is cowrie shells, to Bengal, embarked in Maldives. These cowrie shells were a source of wealth to the Maldivians. So definitely even till the 17th century, the Maldivians were shipping cowrie shells to Bengal. So this was the original route. And Level's description actually says that they were fished twice a month, 3 days before the new moon and 3 days after the new moon, and the women would stand up to their waist in the water and pick them up. And then he has himself seen 30 to 40 ships fully loaded with cowries without any cargo. So it is not that the ships will have a lot of cargo and take cowrie shells along with that. So definitely this becomes very important. And he also says that they were in high demand in Bengal and the prices were very high. Now, the most important part, when we did the field work in Maldives, we found that Maldives had got, in the museum in Maldives, we could see these votive stupas. So Maldives has a typical Islamic culture, and the ancient past of Maldives has been worked upon by Michelson. But then here you also have, besides the votive stupas, relic caskets made out of stone from Maldives itself. But we do not know whether inside these relic caskets there were cowrie shells within it or not. But definitely when we look at the northeast concept near Pakistan to Afghanistan to Pakistan, we find that most of the relic caskets, the Buddhist relic caskets, and most of the stupas like Manikyala, Shahaji Ki Tehri and others, they have in their assemblage definitely a cowrie shell inside. So here, this is the cowrie shell from Manikyala stupa, and you can see it has gold object, a ring, some coins, and a cowrie shell besides a crystal. So cowrie shell is again very important ritualistic element in the Buddhist relic caskets here. But now here, these are the places where we have done the field work in Maldives, and you can see here, this is the Kashidu Buddhist stupa remain, and from Maldives itself I'm now talking about, that you have a stupa remain over here in Kashidu, and there are multiple stupas which have been traced in this Kashidu site. And this is stupa number 33, 32 and 33. This is very interesting kind of a stupa where you have multiple edges like this, 16-sided structure, which is unique, which we do not find very on and off. This is a very rare kind of a stupa. And inside this Kashidu stupa, we found a cowrie shell cache. In Maldivian context, these are not money. Because in Maldives, it is found very easily. Whatever you find very easily cannot be money in your area. So in Maldives, the cowrie shells did not act as money, but they had this context and the concept that Buddhist stupas, relics should have cowrie shells inside, and that's the only reason why we are finding this inside the ruin. And you can see from Kashidu, another area, another site has 62,000 cowrie shells together. So this actually gives us the real context that what is actually happening. You also have a Buddhist grave just near the 62,000 cowrie shells. So this explains the real context. Now, again something very interesting. From Maldives itself, from Gato, in the Lamu Atoll, that is the Lamu district, you get, we have found this Buddha structure. This is a very tiny Buddha, but the features, of course, remind us that the origin definitely is Sri Lankan and not Indian, because the features are that of typical, the iconographic features are that of Sri Lankan features. So now Maldives Buddhism, did it come from India? Did Maldives really get the inspiration from India, or the inspiration came from Sri Lanka? That is what we have to really understand at this point of time. But again, we have a bronze Buddha, which is now from Helgo, which is in Sweden, which again reminds us of this particular Buddha, and the features are very, very similar to this. And again, scholars are of the opinion that this definitely would have been shipped from the Indian Ocean network. Now, I am actually talking about two networks. The first network is the Bay of Bengal Interaction Sphere, which involves Bengal as well as Southeast Asia and proceeds up to China. And down south, you have the Indian Ocean network. Both these networks are getting connected with Buddhism as well as with the cowrie shells. Now, to link Bengal to Sri Lanka, just 2 months ago, we have got hold of a new coin hoard from Tomluk, which is the port in Bengal known as Tamralipti, from where actually Ashoka sent his son and daughter to Sri Lanka. This is the port site of Tamralipti. From there we got this coin hoard, and in this coin hoard of Indian cast coins, we have 2 Sri Lankan pieces which are very rare. These are called the Lakshmi plaques. So for the first time, we have got evidence of very solid, hardcore material evidence of Sri Lankan connection, though this is a little late. This is 2nd century CE, but definitely in the 2nd century CE, there was a connection where material remains are coming. Now see, in the larger canvas, somewhere or the other, we have to place. You might be really wondering by now that I am traveling from Bengal to Sri Lanka to Maldives and at times also to China. And once I even went up to Sweden, and now I am taking you to Egypt. In Egypt, we got a new Brahmi inscription just 2 years back. This was done by Said Botham and his team. The excavation was done, and the inscription is in Sanskrit, and the characters are Brahmi. And here it reads, it talks about a Maitreya Pratima being created, and it also talks about a merchant named Vasula who made this donation on a particular day. And what is very interesting is that he gave this Maitreya Pratima for Sarva Sattva Hita Sukhaya. This is a very typical Buddhist formula we all of us know. And this Sarva Sattva Hita Sukhaya is found in the last line here. And this has been found from Egypt. So a merchant from India was sailing all the way to Egypt, and there he donated a Buddha statue or a Maitreya Pratima. Now, something very interesting is that this Maitreya Pratima which I am talking about is placed inside the Isis temple in Egypt. So the temple was of Isis. I'm just skipping this part just to show you the Maitreya, the marble rock Maitreya which has been found from Egypt, and or Buddha which has been found from Egypt. And this was into pieces. So the whole team has joined this wonderfully, and this has been constructed. And see, there is another Buddha. So by now we have 3 Buddhist images, sculptures from Egypt, and all of them are from the Isis temple complex. So this is the courtesy site bottom. This is a whole site excavation, and I'll be showing you where this has been found. You can see this is the site of Berenike, which I'm talking about actually, and you can see here during the excavation, surprisingly near the Buddha statue, you also have the cowrie shells. But now you can just tell me that you only find cowrie shells, you find the Buddha statue, you find the reference to Maitreya, but where is your relic casket? Because I am talking about the relic caskets in which the death ritual will have the cowrie shells. But see, I'm just coming towards the end of my talk because this is again very important. Recently, I saw an online presentation where Side Botham was talking about the new finds, where he was talking about the anchors of the ship. And he showed this one and said, see, here we have an anchor. He showed this one and he said that here we have a lighthouse and here we have a boat-like structure. So he said anchors and lighthouses and a trident. He said this might be a trident. Now, I just took this one from his presentation and I blew it up for all of you. And now I would like to tell you that this is an ostrich eggshell. And on an ostrich eggshell, you have a Brahmi inscription, which is again very interesting. This is the first ever ostrich eggshell Brahmi inscription found from Egypt. This ostrich eggshell might have gone from India or might have been procured in Egypt. We do not know, because even in the Indian context, in Maharashtra, from Patni, you have several ostrich eggshells. They have been reported during this time. So it might have gone from India, but most probably this was there in the this was locally procured from Egypt. But why am I showing this? Because it reads Ramaya and then Thubo. Definitely a stupa. Thubo in Prakrit means a stupa. So we had a stupa over there, we had the cache of cowrie shells over there, and we have relic caskets over there, and we also have Buddha figures over there. So what was happening in Egypt in the Isis temple is something very interesting, because this is a temple where all the traders are going, keeping their goods, and everybody has been given a space. And in your own space, you can have your own deity. So if you are a Hindu, you can have a Hindu deity. If you are a Buddhist, you can have a Buddhist deity. If you are a Jain, you can have the Tirthankas or whatever. So here, this person who had gone there created a space of his own, which was a Buddhist niche. And we know what was happening exactly. So what I am trying to actually communicate through my presentation today, all the disjointed things which you have seen till now actually talk about the strong presence of cowrie shells in the Buddhist context, and we really need to look at it. And this is the Thoddo Dagaba after the excavation. We also have from Vadu Island a Buddhist, the Buddha Pada. You can see here very distinctly. So Maldives had a thriving Buddhist context. And here you can see a Buddhist votive stupa from Nilandu as well. And you also have some Roman coins reported. Now, this Roman coin gives us the context that the Roman traders who came all the way from there to the Indian Ocean now collected things from Maldives, also took some cowrie shells, and then when they went with them, they took along all these things, all these elements, all these things which I'm just talking about, the concepts which they carried with them is interesting. And in Thodo, of course, we have a Buddha there, which is again very interesting. So I'm trying to link the Silk Road, the horse, silver and cowrie route, which Binyang had suggested, in a much larger context. Because when I am talking about Maldives to Bengal, I'm talking about the maritime route where the ships traveled with cowrie shell as ballast, because the ships cannot sail empty. You have to have a lot of load in between if you have to sail in the Indian Ocean. So they filled them with cowrie shells and took them to Bengal and brought rice in return. And then from Bengal, there was an interconnected trade route through which it went to China, because in 3rd century BC in China there was a dearth of cowrie shells. Now they needed more cowrie shells, and then they took it from Bengal. They took the alternative of getting them from Maldives and from Bengal, and when they were taken from Bengal to Assam and from Assam to China, we find in Assam 4 hoard of cowrie shells, of which the backs are cut. In India it cannot be a money if the backs are cut. So in Assam, there was a factory site, they were cutting. They were cutting the cowrie shells. You can see, I'll just end with this. This is just my last 4 slides. In Assam, Hojai, Lanka and Amiyanagar hoards are there, where a factory site, you can see cut cowrie shells, you can see complete cowrie shells, and also in the process. And there are several other excavation context cowrie shells, which I'm just skipping, but we'll end with this, that even today, till date, in the death rituals of the Hindus, of the Brahminic, those who follow the Brahminical culture, we still use cowrie shells today, and as money. Interestingly, when the Hindu rite is going on, you give cowrie shells which are here to purchase the land in which you are just burning the body, and then you give it to the dome who just does the last rituals here again. And interestingly, these are all Cypra monita and Cypra annulus. So once again, this is the context, which the funerary rites, and it goes back. So now I would really like to look at the future mapping, and we should now do a linguistic survey in Southeast Asia, and how the Malay Peninsula was acting as a link for taking the cowrie shells, and also the other side, still China. And I'm thankful to my friend, Professor Engzian, who has done a great favor to me, and he's collaborated with us to look at all the cowrie shells from these areas. And you can see this is from the Shanshan country. I have to end, I'll just show you the slides quickly. Folklore Museum of Thailand, here also you have a lot of cowrie shells, and the metallic cowries. When there was a dearth of cowrie shells in China, they started using bone cowrie, stone cowrie, metal cowrie, and every other cowrie shell. So here this gives us the context, and from 3rd to 17th century you have cowrie shells from Borneo as well, which is again very interesting, and these are from China. So I would really like to thank several organizations, and also Indian Council of Historical Research, and University of Calcutta, British Museum, SOAS Library, British Library, Malay National Museum, and Bibliothèque Nationale, my scholar Bullo P, and my friend Engzian, of course. Thank you so much for a patient listening, because there was so much to share, but it was very difficult to finish in time. Thank you.
Any questions for Professor Susmita?